Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out People of Reddit. Story 1. Use our driveway for a shortcut. No more shortcut. We have a large easement next to our house. It's actually a lovely spot with a view over a creek and up a small valley to wooded hills. Heaps of birds and wildlife, no sea of housing like behind us. It also leads to the cul-de-sac of a dead-end road, which was fenced off until someone decided one afternoon to barrel their 4x4 right through it. Even before this, in-car or phone navigation has taken people up the dead-end street and tried to send them over the non-existent road between us and the cul-de-sac, as it is significantly shorter than the normal way around. Since the fence has been rammed down, people have been using it as a shortcut, and probably because GPS tells them to go that way, the more they go that way, the more GPS picks up on the route. People were dropping off or mounting the gutter to get on and off the grass to the road, which is okay. There was such a variety of vehicles from pizza delivery to large trucks, tradesmen, and lost visitors, that we couldn't just say, "Hey, please don't, it's not a road." It had gotten to the point that there was a dusty track. Then they started cutting across our front lawn to use our personal driveway, and we had enough. So we called council, by chance getting hold of someone we know, and 3 days later there were 2 giant rocks blocking the way. Still allowing the walkers, kids, and bike riders passage, but no more cars and trucks. Story 2. Slam your car door into my sister's car. A few years ago my sister asked me to go to the store and help out in her car as our brother was using mine. Once we got to the store, we pulled into a spot almost the same time as another lady who upon parking freaking slammed her door open and hit my sister's passenger door while I gave her the WTF look, and she didn't even acknowledge us and walked away. I told my sister to wait a couple moments, and when the lady was far enough I slammed open my sister's door, with her permission of course, several times, hard enough to chip paint and made her car alarm go off. We then went and parked in a different spot, which was kinda lame cuz we were in a spot close to the entrance. Get f***ed lady. Story 3. Made my former boss, ex-friend, and former co-workers lose their jobs. So the start of this petty revenge happened over a year ago. Just found out about the results last week. I, 24M, used to work at a non-profit as a warehouse associate for their food distribution program. It was a good job for where I was at and where I was in life, easy work, easy hours, good pay. At the time I had made friends with my fiance's friends, let's call them Jim, 25M, and Bailey, 25NB. We played D&D, hung out most weekends, etc. Jim was frankly, a really bad employee. When we met he had gone through multiple jobs in a span of a few months, all of them quitting because of various reasons: bad workplace, toxic co-workers, anxiety issues, etc. I felt for him and stuck my neck out to get a job at the warehouse, and he got it. On top of that, he got kicked out of his dad's place and had to move in with Bailey and their mom because he refused to do any of the chores his dad asked him to do. All was going well for a while. He was only working part-time, but he seemed to enjoy the new job, got along with everyone, and we had a good time working together. Even though I'm a few years younger than him, I have a lot more work experience than he does, so I was even able to mentor him in good work ethic, how to run forklift/warehouse equipment, and how to get his job done better and more efficiently. Because of me, him and I were the only competent employees in that warehouse for a few months, as we had 2 other associates that were constantly showing up late, leaving early, on their phones more than working, etc. We will call then Mary, 29F, and Zeke, 20M. Relevant later in the story. Now my immediate boss wasn't an issue, we got along fine, but the program director Bethany, late 40s F, was a real gatekeep, gaslight, girl boss. Plus, she wasn't great at her job. Granted, she could write grants really well and get the money we needed, but she spent it on the absolute dumbest shit. $30K and for a cargo box cooler for outside that wasn't meant to be ran 24/7, blew up after a year and a half, tiny electric forklifts that could barely lift 300 pounds, a $80,000 gas engine Ford F250 with a lift and bull bars to pull a trailer that barely weighed a ton, a 30-foot mobile pantry tiny house, and solar panels for it that never got installed, and 2 single-axle box trucks that weren't anywhere near rated to haul what we were loading them with. When I voiced opinion or complaints about our equipment or the work ethic of my co-workers, I was either blatantly ignored or told I need to learn to work with people with different work ethics than myself. So at a point I just stopped saying anything, let her dig her own grave so to speak. Now back to Jim and Bailey. As we got closer as friends, so began talks of finding a place we could all move in together. Never made any agreement, never shook hands or confirmed anything. Just talked about it. Then out of nowhere my older sister brought up moving in with her 3 hours away to her town where my fiancé and I could finally get out of our hometown and make better money. She even agreed to pay majority rent, first last, and any fees till we got on our feet. So of course we agreed and started job searching. I decided to let Jim know while we were at work about what was going on, and let him know if they wanted, him and Bailey could take over the lease for our current place. Nothing fancy, a studio basically, but a house on a 1/4 acre 5 minutes from the warehouse, and the rent was about 40% lower than anywhere else in town for the same amount of space. Jim seemed to take it fine, said he would let Bailey know, and that was that. Next thing I know, my fiancé is getting her phone blown up with calls and texts saying we were fucking them over, and I was a misogynistic asshole for talking to Jim at work instead of talking to both of them at the same time. Also decided to tell my fiancé I was manipulating her into ruining their friendship and moving away. At that point I decided to end the friendship between myself and them, but told my fiancé she was her own person and could make her own decisions on the matter. She, after a few days of thought and more angry texts now attacking me and my fiancé, decided to do the same. I tried to talk to Jim at work about it all, but he told me he didn't think this was the appropriate place to do so. In a very passive-aggressive manner. So I just dropped the matter entirely and kept doing my job. Fast forward a week or two, sister informs us she decided to move in with her boyfriend instead. No big deal, life goes on, right? At this point I'm just continuing to do my job as I always have, minus communicating with Jim other than when it was necessary to get the job done. Next thing I know, Zeke is no longer being friendly or communicating with me. Mary is telling everyone and their mother I've been trying to fuck her since I got hired, and I'm getting written up by Bethany because Jim filed a complaint about me bullying him in the workplace and got it signed by 2 anonymous co-workers, while the only other employee at the time was extremely friendly with me and we even still hang out to this day. So obviously the signers were Zeke and Mary. I just continued to do my work in silence and started looking for a new job. Here comes the PR. I have a background in environmental work, so when I found a job opening at the same at-risk youth high school I got my GED from teaching kids about the environment while doing environmental work. I jumped on it. As an added bonus, that same school provided funding for the warehouse and even handled some employee contracts. Specifically, Jim, Zeke, and Mary's contracts. Evil hand rubbing, spent a few months working my ass off, got a few kids graduated, and got my good graces up with the contract manager for the warehouse. I started expressing small opinions at first, like how some people working at the warehouse didn't show the best work ethic even though they had been there for 3 years, Mary. How some would shown up to work late and hungover, Zeke. And how others took advantage of the workplace and would leave early every day and take boxes of food for themselves, Jim. Then the contract manager started asking me questions. Specific ones about certain employees and certain program directors. So I shared them, all of them, every single dirty little secret in that warehouse. This post is already long enough, but trust me, there were enough things to tell her about Zeke, Mary, Jim, and Bethany to write a fucking novel. She just wrote them down and I never heard an update. All right with me. I've worked long enough to know shit rolls downhill whether I know about the results or not. Fast forward almost a year later, contract to the school ends, decided to move on to try and find a more lucrative job so I can start building a family. Poor decision on my part, but hey, life goes on. End up working at a grocery store, money gets tight and I talk to my former manager at the warehouse, the one that I was cool with, and he says I can come in and pick up some food. Begrudgingly I go the next day doing a walk of shame, not excited to face Zeke, Mary, and Jim again after all the time passed and the waters finally calm. But when I walk in, it's just the manager, no one else. I get my food and we start catching up. Turns out the shit rolled downhill and turned into a whole shit slide. Bethany got investigated by her boss about her spending so hard she resigned. Zeke, Mary, and Jim's contracts never got renewed and they all got fired. The school I worked at cut funding to the warehouse because of finding out how Bethany was spending it, and the non-profit restructured the whole thing to run off volunteers. At this point I'm in my car ending the conversation with my manager. Told my manager I'm sorry and feel guilty for the pressure it's put on his job. He asked why I felt guilty. I just shrugged and said oh no reason, smiled at him and drove off with a few boxes of free food and the world's biggest shit-eating grin. Also as I type this I'm filling out paperwork for a job that's covering relocation to a new town and is paying $10 more an hour than the school paid me. TLDR, ex-friend, ex-boss, and ex-co-workers fucked me over, so I got a job at the place that handled their contracts and funding and got them all fired. Story 4. Mill Revenge. So my Mill was always being really horrible to me. She once cancelled my baby shower without telling me because I wouldn't agree to give her the money from my unborn child's account to pay for the food. Which BTW she insisted on making. I told her I would pay and have the party catered NBD, but she got angry. This was a constant occurrence. She was always calling her family members to talk bad about me, and so they started treated me differently as well. What my Mill didn't tell everyone was that not only was her phone in my name but I paid the bill. So I got ires of the crap, went online and changed her phone name to mine. Now whenever she calls someone it came up as me. She was annoyed and was complaining to me how nobody was picking up her calls. It took her forever to realize, and I was silently jumping for joy whenever she complained. Edit. I43F did this a few years ago and honestly this is nothing I could tell you much worse. I assure you this woman is real and this did happen. Maybe I'll start my own subreddit called Monster MIL. Edit. I've been with my husband for nearly 20 YRS. This only happened for the first 16 YRS, much of it had to do with cultural issues. Mill and I are now good. She is still crazy but I learned how to set boundaries and stand up for myself. Yes, this was passive-aggressive but it was the best my younger self could do. Also, please remember I was just trying to make light of a bad situation. Gotta get your chuckles in where you can. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.